Hello and welcome to ShePack. I'm your host, Lenice Wolf, and today I'm joined by Jess Kao, Senior Director of Marketing Operations and Martech at Cloudflare. She's also a mother of a 7 and 4-year-old, both with high-functioning autism, and in today's episode, we're discussing parenting and surviving a high-tech job. Jess, I'm so excited to have you on the podcast. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here with you and your listeners.
Yeah, no, we're excited to have you. So, okay, for those of us who are just struggling with balancing having babies, high-tech jobs, or even those of us who are considering having children, drop the tea, my friend. What is the secret sauce and how do you balance parenting and surviving a high-tech job?
Oh my God, do we have like 5 days to talk about all these things, right? So, oh my God, what is the secret? I there's a lot of, I have a lot of fans, I have a lot of followers, and I think, you see like this, it's not even a facade, but you see this like, me here smiling and everything, but like underneath all of that, like the amount of times and, just being vulnerable here with all of you, with you and all of your listeners, right? Like there's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears and a lot of tears that go on behind this. So like, don't think like this is a struggle for everyone. You see successful moms, you see successful women, and I have learned so much on this journey, especially being a mom of 2 ASD amazing kids, super smart, they just need extra love and extra attention and extra things in life with autism. And it's been a journey, and I'm so excited to share what I've learned because this has been a journey for like 7+ years with 2 kids, and then also trying to grow an incredible career. And the TLDR of it, we'll start with the end and then we'll walk back and peel open the layers. Is we got to be efficient, right? We talk about like, we got to make every minute count, every moment count. And it is the lessons that I have learned to parent 2 amazing children, the mindfulness, the change in like yourself as a person is the same skill sets that you need to be an amazing leader, to climb the ladder. I'm in marketing. I'm in marketing operations, data and analytics and infrastructure, right? It's the exact same thing. And, when I look at the skills that I have needed to gain for like, I've taken so many classes in like parenting, mindfulness for special needs kids, learning all of those things. And like, okay, also at the flip side of like, okay, executive coaching and those things. And what I realized was like, oh my gosh, they're the exact same thing. What I'm actually doing for the skill sets that I need to gain to parent, 2 wonderful kids is the same, like literally word for the same skill sets that I need. Aha. Hello. Right? Like, I can be twice as efficient if I just realize that they're 2 of the same thing. So that's kind of the thesis that I was just so excited to work with you on this platform to share, because my goal is if I have impacted or changed one person that is listening, that like fills my cup, right? And we talk about like, the demands, high demanding technology job, high demanding parenting needs. Right. One of the many things is right. Self-compassion, filling your cup. And this is not like, oh, I'm going to go get my nails done. Oh, I'm going to go get a spa day. Right. Like is recognizing what fills your cup and being very intentional about it. And what I know about myself is what fills my cup is helping people. So literally sitting on this podcast with you fills my cup and energizes me. So thank you for letting me do this because this fills my cup. Right. And I also teach yoga. I've actually been a yoga teacher longer than I have been in marketing operations.
Oh my gosh.
Right. And like, and something like, I went out to lunch with my yoga students yesterday. I've been teaching them for like a long time. These are students that have been with me like 7, 8, 9 years. And I teach from home. And so my kids pop onto the screen all the time. And actually one of my yoga students who's who means a lot to me, he actually said, it's like, hey, I just want to let you know, I've actually seen a change in your parenting. I actually see a difference in the behavior of your kids. And I actually see it because I see a change in you, because they see me every week. They see my kids every week. My kids barge in on my yoga class every single week. They have seen them grow up for the past, I've been teaching since the pandemic at home So it's been however many years, right? It's been like 3.5 years. So my older one has gone from 4 to 8 now. And it just meant so much to me to see like an outside person say like, wow, I've actually recognized a difference. And he actually, because he's a grandfather now, and he has kids my age and he has grandkids my age. And he's like, I actually think it's a change in your behavior that is actually making the difference in your kids' behavior. And I'm like, wow. You know, and that meant so much to me, right? It's just kind of a validation of like all of the classes and all of the therapies and all of the things that I have had to do with my kids is like, you know what I mean? Like an outside person has seen that difference. I feel a difference because during the pandemic, I felt like I was just, every day I was just trying to survive. I was just trying to make it through the day. I was just trying to survive. Can I get through these meetings? Can I get through my kids? Like how many meltdowns does my children have to have every day? Because like we used to do like 4 or 5 a day times 2 kids, right? So that's a lot, right? But it was, you know, this is very like yoga and mindfulness, which is I take a mindfulness approach both at home and at work, right? Again, that same thing. And it's like, it's a change in me. It is a change in me as a mother, me as a, you know, as a leader, as a senior leader in marketing. It is a change in me. Right? It is up to what can I control? What can I do different? Right? Because I remember a long time ago, someone said to me, like, think about it from a scientific perspective. Think of it from a biology perspective. In an environment, right? If someone changes, that change impacts the surrounding environment. Right? Because we're so focused on like, oh my God, if you would just put your, you know, if you just go to bed, like without fussing, would you just brush your teeth? And like, why is this a battle every day? Right? Does it sound familiar? Right? Like every day is like, how many meals do I have to cook for you before I'll find something that you will eat? Right? But like, if you change how you are, the environment has to change. And that was just validated by, you know, my yoga student who was like, wow, I've seen you every week for the past 4 years with your children. And I've noticed a change in you. How powerful is that? And if I can give an example, right? I took like this again, Stanford has this parenting mindfulness class for special needs kids. It is virtual. And then afterwards, 8 weeks. And then it was, and we could talk about my village and what, and where you get all these things. But like my kids have, you know, sensory processing disorders. So everything is a thing, right? So like, okay, all your apples have to be peeled. And like, I used to dread, really? You want it peeled? You want it cut a certain way? But then I said, okay, you know what? I'm going to take the approach that every time I have to peel an apple, that is when I'm going to meditate, right? You're like in an ideal world, like, okay, every day I'm going to go meditate for 5 minutes. I'm going to go center myself, right? Where am I going to go find an extra 5 minutes? We got to be efficient, moms. Let's go.
Right.
So I took something that I dreaded, right? Which is like peeling an apple. And this, I learned through the Stanford class. And I was like, I was going to take that 60 seconds. And this was my meditative moment, right? Can I be present? Can I observe the apple? Can I observe the smell? Can I just be present? Can I feel my feet? And it's finding those efficiencies. It's just a different way to look at it. Because then I didn't get mad, right? Not only was I not escalated and like really frustrated, like I have to go peel this apple again. Like, can't you just eat the skin? To, okay, I'm doing this and I'm actually getting something out of it because this is my meditative presence moment.
Yeah. It almost forces you to be intentional and be in that moment versus I feel like us working moms, there's so many lists and things that we need to do. And what I love is you find a way to coexist. And I think because of your strong ops background, you operationalize your professional life with your personal life. And I think that makes such a secret sauce of success right there. And it's interesting when you were saying, you know, I'm smiling on the outside. I always tell people, yeah, I'm smiling on the outside. I am crying on the inside until we start to figure out these different pieces of secret sauce. Before we uncover and understand more of that, tell me this, at what age did you start noticing some of the behaviors within they're both girls, is that right?
My older one is 8 and it's my daughter. And then my younger one is a boy and he's now 4. Yeah.
Oh, and at what age did you start to notice these behaviors and where were you at that moment in your career as well?
So when I had my first one, this was before the pandemic where working from home wasn't a thing. And so I made a very intentional choice to actually go into consulting. because so that I can work from home, because I can do a lot of stuff at home. So that was a very intentional choice to have. And then everyone, then it was fine. Everybody worked from home, right? So for my first, for my first one, you know, that's where I was in my career. I was like, look, it's my first kid, right? Like the world it's overwhelming to be a new mom. You're trying to navigate like being a mom, having kids and a career. And so I, you know, didn't take time off completely from career, but just like, you know, I'm just going to take it like less stress and do that. And I think probably about 3 years old, where things were like just a little, you know, and here's a saying about meeting autistic kids. When you've met one autistic kid, you've met one. Because there are similarities, but like everyone displays a little differently, right? Because like the things that are traditional, and this is where I'm really big on like education, right? Like eye contact. Both my kids have perfectly fine eye contact. Both my kids are extremely verbal and extremely intelligent, right? This 2E, right? Kid, two exceptional. You know, so it came about in terms of rigidity and routine, things where she's in a contradiction. Her brain is literally stuck in a thought loop. Like she would ask a question, Mom, when's your birthday? And I would answer it. And then she would keep asking it over and over and over and over and over again. And no matter what answer I would give, like she couldn't. And then she would get dysregulated. Things like loud noises. So here's the fun part. Both my kids have sensory processing disorder. One's sensory seeking and one's sensory avoidant. So they're complete opposites. So what triggers one? They trigger each other. So like my older one is like textures, socks, itchy material, right? Is like being in like it's like it triggers her like a flight or flight response, right? It's like you and me, we would be like, oh, we're being chased by a bear. For her, it's like this itchy thing. It's the same, it triggers the same response. So there's a whole set of emotional regulation issues. But hers is loud noises, and textures, and food. Food becomes a thing. Right. So she needs like crunchy, like, you know, crunchy cold things is what she'll eat. My younger one is sensory seeking. So he loves loud noises and he loves to crash into things and he loves to like bury under things, and he needs like to do what's called heavy work. It's literally like you have to basically give him an obstacle course every hour for like 5 or 10 minutes for him to regulate. So can you imagine, like, you have to, like, how hard is it to like figure out a gym routine for yourself 3 days a week? And to get him to focus, I have to like figure out, okay, we have to, let's go push a laundry basket with some heavy books, or like, let's go bear walk our way to the bedroom, right? All the time in order to get him to focus. So literally I've had to, you know, get what seems like a second degree in early childhood development for special needs kids, right?
Yeah. Well, how do you make that time too? Because again, like you were doing the consulting piece in the background, and then now it's your first child, especially for your first daughter, and you're noticing these behaviors at 3 years old. Where do you go? Where do you even start to get the resources to help equip you while you're also working and managing things in the house with your husband? Where do you go for these type of resources? Where do you even start?
And I think that's where your tribe and your support network is so important, right? Because it is so hard to navigate all of this. I mean, it took years. It took a year to get a diagnosis. It took a year. We're still on wait lists for therapies. We're still navigating, like, what is ABA? What is occupational therapy? What is this? What is that? And, you know, you feel really, really, really alone when you're trying to go through this by yourself. But like, you know, 1, self-compassion, 2, common humanity, right? Which is, you are not the only one that is going through this. And there's a couple of places that have been so key and so critical, which is, you know, thank goodness for Facebook groups. Like that, to me, you know, I know a lot of, you know, some people are like, oh, we don't do fit. I'm like, especially during the pandemic, especially what we face every day, like that is my lifeline. And I'll give a plug for, there's a Moms in Tech Facebook group, right, of women, moms in tech around the world, right, that, you know, we're facing the same thing. We're moms and we're in tech, right? So people that understand you, people that understand me, right? There's this commonality and there's like this immediate bond. And then there's also like our subgroups, but then also we have like a Moms in Tech for parents with neurodiverse kids. And so we learn from each other, like, you know, it's almost like the ramp is like was really slow because you were alone. You do a lot of Google searching and like, I don't know what's going on, right? And then like you find your tribe, and then, then the information is a lot. So I think one is finding your tribe, finding people. There's a bunch of other Facebook groups out there, like here in the Bay Area. There's one on like parenting special needs in the Bay Area. Then there's one for like that's more like not just the Bay Area, but one for high functioning autistic kids, right? Like, so finding those, and there's a lot of ones where I'm just reading all this information, just kind of absorbing all this information because there's a lot to maneuver, and there's a lot, right? And that's true for both like at work, right? But like mostly so for, what as moms, right? And you learn from each other, right? There's not, especially with the pandemic, especially moms now, right? Where, it's just coming back, but like, I'm a big fan of moms groups, right? Cause that's where you learn the most. And especially for what in my current, my current situation, I actually started a monthly group dinner here in the Bay Area for moms in tech with special needs kids. We actually had one like 2 nights ago, and we're like, we're going to do this every month. And every time, like these are, people that you just meet in whatever situation that you're in, right? Even the two of us, right?
Yeah.
We just met, right? But it's like, wow, there's that immediate bond and connection because I get you. I see you. I understand you. So for someone to understand what it's like to have a very high demanding tech job in the Bay Area, right? There's a lot of pressure, financially, it's hard to be out here. And then on top of the fact that, we have a tech job, that means I'm in meetings 9 hours a day. I've got like so many things going through my head. And then on top of that, I have 2 wonderful kids that have lots and lots of needs, right? And to meet your village or your tribe, whatever it is that sees you, that gets you, that like every time I learn like, oh my God, I had no idea. And like, oh, the things that I learn are completely life-changing, right? Like, and it's those nuggets and it's those things that are so important. And it's the same, and it's the same philosophy that I take too, as well as from a career perspective. So I was very fortunate that like I have a good set of what I call your mentors, which I consider like a board of directors, right? Companies have board of directors. You in your career should have a board of directors, and I have intentionally found mentors, and I meet with my mentors at least once a quarter, if not more frequently, to give you advice because you cannot do this on your own, whether you're a mom or of special needs kids or trying to navigate your way in your career. If you had to go reinvent the wheel every time, we wouldn't be moving very fast. And so I think it's getting advice from peer groups and then also mentors. Yeah. And I think being
No. Oh, I was going to say, it's interesting too, because there's so many different resources. I agree with you. I mean, you need a village to, one, keep yourself sane. I think to also know that you're not alone. And then even the other piece of it is just like a guiding block. It's like, you have all these like tools, but sometimes you don't know how to use them, or you didn't even know that there was a wrench that you actually desperately needed until you have this like board of directors or people that are coming in. I think something where like I've ran into this myself is like, how do you find these communities? How do you find these mentors or therapists? Because it just seems like if you go out on the web, you get this like plethora of just all these like volume lists of things that you should do. What do you recommend that's worked for you? How do you find these communities and these mentors and groups that are part of your village now?
No, absolutely. And I think what was eye-opening is like, no one become like leadership. Like if I talk about from a career perspective, leadership is a skill, right? Like I always thought like, oh, wow, I really admire my VP and SVP. Well, he didn't get there on his own. He had that person had mentors. That person has an executive coach. CEOs, CMOs, they go to classes. They have their coaches too. And I think we don't talk about that, right? We just see the success, of someone, standing on stage and this amazing career. And we don't talk about what actually happens, right? And so, I think there's a couple of things. There's the network part. There's networking, joining groups, wherever your people are, right? So for marketing operations, I'm pretty active in the marketing operations community. There's lots of Slack groups, conferences, and being proactive and reaching out because people love like informational interviews, right? Like that's for folks to like if you want to grow in your career, you have to reach out, or, it's up to you to reach out. It's like, hey, I really admire you. Would you mind spending 30 minutes and be very intentional and have these questions, right? Like, I think there's the networking aspect, right? Like identifying people that have done the thing that you want to go do, and like go talk to them and learn from them and learn the nuggets. And there's the community, right? Marketing operations, we have a pretty strong community. I'm super active in it. Always happy to help people, but for the people that are going to be proactive and ask questions. And so, and there's that aspect. But also, nobody got here by themselves, right? It's a skill set. You're constantly going to school. My mentors give me homework. And also I also have a coach. My previous company paid for 6 months for all like, high performers, or they paid for like 6 months of executive coaching or coaching. And I've just luckily found one and have kept one for a really long time. And for me, I've had that person for about 2 years now. And it's like, that is like part of my village to help me accelerate and get to kind of the leadership skills I need, because you can kind of do this by trial and error, and it's going to take you a lot longer. Or I literally was like, I would talk through situations with my coach and work through them every single week, right? So like the cycle of improvement and getting that third party person of like, oh, well, this situation, here's a Harvard Business Review article to read. Okay, let's discuss it. I like homework, right? And it's a very operationalized way of getting, to executive coaching. Because a lot of times it's interesting, because I've spoken to her, and she's like, well, some people show up and they're like, I don't have an opinion on what I want to work on. I'm like, well, then no one's going to be able to help you if you don't have intention, right? You have to come to the table, right, halfway of like, okay, this is the challenge that I'm trying to overcome, or I would like to do X, right? Or like, I would want, like, here's the business problem. I want to move up in my career. What is the gap that I'm missing, right? Because you don't know what the gap is. You don't know what you don't know, but you have to come with an objective, right? And so it's interesting that people come, it's like, okay, I have an executive coach. They weren't really effective. I'm like, well, what were you trying to do? I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, well, I don't know then, right? Because you have to be goal driven, and then I don't know how to help you.
Well, I'm going to repeat what you said too, because you have to be proactive. You need to lean in. If I think about communities, and I've seen certain communities, and you actually shared with me the moms group, and you can join and do nothing and just sit in the background. You're not going to probably get anything out of that. Or you can lean in. The other piece that you had mentioned is people are open to having informative interviews. I think you're able to meet more people. You're able to get more exposed, and that's going to give you insight. But all of it is, you have to come in knowing that people aren't just going to give you all this knowledge and start investing in you. You have to be very clear on areas that you want to develop. And I think the more conversations you go in, it'll start to become clear on what questions to ask. Now, you had mentioned you've been with your coach for the past 2 years. What insights have you gained from them?
Oh my God, so much, just so much. Like, where do I start? Like, and like I said, I like homework. So when we work through something, I get a Harvard Business Review article, we discuss it. I basically put this in a Google Doc, and I have like 70 articles, right, that are very specific, right? It's like, I have this challenge. Okay, here's an article, right? I have this challenge. Here's an article for that particular problem. I mean, so much. Okay, the biggest impact that she has had on me is I don't know if you've ever heard of Clifton Strengths, right? There's lots of not personality tests, but like there's different ones out there, like that, Myers-Briggs. I've done a lot of them, and the one, if this helps somebody out there, then yay. But like Clifton Strengths is like literally my North Star. So one, I make everybody on my team take Clifton Strengths, so I understand it's a ranking of 34 strengths. From 1 to 34, and then and then I have my whole team listed on this grid so I can see. And basically, I use that as the backdrop of how I approach, how I coach, how I use folks. One of the biggest aha moments for me was understanding, right? Like, we usually look at our weaknesses, right? And we're like, okay, we got to go fix those things. But in actuality, the flip side to that is actually we look at like if you go to the gym and you're like, oh, I can't lift a thing, and like trying to go lift the like 500 pounds is not going to work, right? So it's a complete switch in mindset of like, well, if you're weak in that, then like trying to do that isn't going to really do anything. And the whole Clifton Strengths philosophy is, well, in order to do something, you should focus on your strengths, the 5 strengths, right? So like, for example, I'll be real vulnerable here. Empathy is like lowest on my totem pole. So if you were strength on empathy, how you would approach a situation is going to be different than how I approach a situation, because I don't have your empathy strength, right? Mm-hmm. So instead, I'm going to take my 5 strengths, or not my 5 strengths, but like the top strengths, and I'm going to use them in a different yet creative way to address and approach the problem differently than how you would approach it, because your strengths are different, right? Like, so for example, like you're going to cook spaghetti, I'm going to cook spaghetti, but like I have a fancy pot, but you have a fancy spatula. How we're going to go and make this big, dish is going to be different because your strengths and your tools are different. So there's that aspect of like using your strengths creatively to address how someone with a strength that you don't have as a strength would address it, right? Because trying to do something your way with me would not work. And then the other thing is, a lot of times your strengths are dialed too high. It's, blind spots of your strengths. They're over strengths. So it's like like the gas thing on your stove, right? It's like usually you can do a lot of improvement and gains just by turning your strengths down. And so with that philosophy, that is the foundation of how I work with my team. I have like everyone's strengths, my strengths, and it's how do I build a team? How do I get them to work together? How do I coach them through different situations? That has been the biggest impact in terms of how to lead. And then I coach people through, everyone is growing because we're addressing their overstrengths and getting them to be aware of what's dialed up. And it's huge, right? Because otherwise, how would I'm coaching outcomes. I can't coach outcomes. It's like, how are you approaching the problem? But anyway, that's been amazing.
No, I love that too, because I do think that's a best practice that a lot of people may miss, especially when you're leading teams, is everybody comes to the table with very different personalities, very different strengths, and how you're able to first, take the time to understand everybody's different personalities and figure out where one may be weak. Somebody else on the team is very strong. So how you're able to orchestrate all the talents together provides an exceptional outcome. Now, if we start to go back to what this means to your personal life, and I think specifically around, you had mentioned you're a yoga instructor. You've found ways to build this community. You are balancing everything from high tech with your children. Walk me through your planning process of how you integrate your personal with your professional life.
Okay. Right. You take the same operational skills. What's interesting is, we talk about strengths, right? And it was in like a free on-demand conference for parents of special needs kids, where one of the lecturers was focusing on like, have you identified what the strengths of your kids are? Each kid is like, what is a superpower or strength of your child? Right. And it's the same thing, right? It's the exact same thing with work, right? Like it's, what is the superpower strengths of each of your individual persons on your team, and how do you use those superpowers to help them? So that's the exact same thing. So my exact same approach, right?
Yeah.
So, for my little one, he has big feelings. He feels everything, and they're so smart. And so my older one really likes being the big sister and likes to help out. So I'm like, great. You get to be a mini behavioral therapist to your little brother, right? So like if you can't emotionally regulate, but you love teaching, awesome. You're going to teach your little brother how to meditate. And she loves that, right? Like, awesome. She sat, like, her little brother was screaming and jumping up and down and being goofy and stuff like that. And she sat there and she led an entire like breathing meditation with her eyes closed.
That's
right?
so impressive.
Like, awesome. Right? Awesome. Right? So like, right, you got to point the strengths of your children to each other. Right?
Well, what I'm hearing from you though is effective delegating. Not only do you delegate in your work life, but you're delegating in your internal village, which includes your children as well, and identifying their strengths. It's amazing.
Right? It's the same. it's the same, right? And I think it was that moment where in the class we talked about what are the strengths of your children, and then in my executive coaching, it was around that it was like, oh my gosh, they're the same thing. And then what was interesting with my executive coaching is like when I asked them, like they all this is like, okay, I want to executive coaching, etc. And then the first thing that we talked about was emotional regulation, and I'm like, what? Like, wait a minute, why are we talking about emotional regulation and emotional intelligence and leadership? I'm like, oh, well, you have to make sure you're not hungry, because if you're hungry, then you're hangry. And if you're hangry, then like you can't create the safe space for your team, right? Here we go. It's the same thing. So in parent coaching, because we're also doing parent-child interaction therapy for my younger one, again, it's about the parent, and then to decrease the meltdowns with the children. It's the same thing. You have to be emotionally regulated in order to make sure so that they can role model, you, because you're asking them to be emotionally regulated. And I'm like, oh, everything boils down to emotional regulation for everything that we do, and emotional intelligence and emotional well-being for everything. So if you think about what you asked, like, how do you plan for work and for home? I'm like, well, it's the same thing. It's identical, right? So if you, and that's how we get the operational efficiency gains between the two, right? So how do I plan, right, for my kids? Like I Google Sheet there, all of their classes and therapies and stuff. Like the same approach that I take at work is the same approach that I operationalize my kids' schedule, right? Like my daughter had a spelling test yesterday, or was it yesterday? No, it was today. It was today. So we're going to be super efficient. Great. What are the opportunities? In the car ride, we can start practicing these 10 words. She loves art. So how can we incorporate art in testing her spelling, right? Because her strength is art. So how can we, right? It's the same thing. So great. Now we have made efficiency gains of like, we're going to practice for a spelling test going back and forth in the car because that's where we can gain the time. What can we parallel path? Is the same thing at work. What can we parallel path while we're trying to get alignment on XYZ? What can we parallel path? That's what I'm doing. I'm parallel pathing the operations of my children and their exams. Right?
Well, I love that though, because it is like you can get very overwhelmed so quickly with all the list of to-dos and completely segregate personal with professional. But you're doing that parallel planning and operationalizing, but then also taking into account the emotional regulations that impact both sides. So it's almost like you don't have to relearn something very separate. As you're starting to build, you're just applying them and layering them in parallel with each other.
It's actually more, it's actually like, if you think about it, I'm practicing my executive leadership skills all day long because I am teaching my children about emotional regulation. We talk a lot, right? Like, you hear about social emotional learning that's being more in the schools, the zones of regulation. They started putting that into the schools for both kids. Like the first day of school, they talked about the zones of regulation. If you're in the red zone, how do you bring yourself back into the green zone? So we talk about that. We verbalize that all day long. I role model that for my kids all day long. Like, mommy's in the red zone right now. Mommy's going to take a deep breath right now. And then Kaiden will be like, Mommy, I'm going to come and give you a hug because you're in the red zone and hugs make you in the green zone, right? Like, so we're role modeling that all day long. And then that is, right, practice for emotional regulation, which also is practice for, right, when you are, when you're leading teams at work, or you're dealing with stakeholders, or you're dealing, you might be annoyed that like someone is asking for this ridiculous thing at work, but like, okay, again, it all boils down to, okay, have you practiced your emotional regulation? Well, great. You're actually double, right? You're doing double duty when you're doing it at home. So it's like, that's why when I first started, like, actually my superpower is, and looking at, if I didn't have 2 autistic children, I actually don't think, like, I wouldn't have been in all these mindfulness classes. I wouldn't have done all of these things. And actually, I don't think I would. I know for a fact I wouldn't be as successful as an executive leader because I am forced to meditate with 2 screaming children.
Yeah.
You try doing that, right? Like, right? It's just like, we think about, we have to meditating when you get up in the morning in this calm and peaceful space. I'm like, I got to meditate in the harshest and hardest environment. If I can do that, I can do freaking anything, right?
Yeah, that's right. Well, it's like, it all sounds good in theory, but then when you're actually applying it, you're like, oh, I got this. I got this.
Right. It's just like, by the time I hit my first meeting, I have had to negotiate so many things about who's eating breakfast and who's going to put their pants on and like who's screaming, running away of like, have you eaten yet? Like, where's your homework? Before like 8:30 in the morning, I have already done all this negotiation. Like the challenges at work in comparison are like, I got this, right? And it's that self-confidence and that, do you get overwhelmed at work? Sure. But like, if I can navigate all this stuff at home, this is, not to discount like stuff at work can be challenging, but like, you got this, right? Like this pales in comparison.
Yeah. How do you also practice? Because you mentioned like you're also a yoga instructor. And the thing that I keep thinking through in my head, because I'm like, okay, I got this Google sheet. I'm going to bust it out, figure out how to merge it with my professional life. But then how do you layer on and prioritize yoga instructing in an already busy week?
I have been, like I said, I've been teaching yoga since 2012. I got my certification in 2012. So yeah. So it's been like 11 years. I've had, before kids, I taught like 7 classes a week. I taught the work yoga class, right? Here's my efficiency. I'm going to be the work yoga instructor, right? So I get my workout in. I'm super efficient. It carves out my time, right? And so I always taught the work yoga class too. I was like, I'm going to do your marketing ops and I'm going to teach your yoga class. Sound good? Good. Awesome. I've always, through that time, I've always had a Saturday morning, 8 a.m. class, which I teach on Zoom for free. And, more the welcome merrier if anybody wants to come. I've recorded all my classes. They're on YouTube. It is fills my cup time. It is my no kid time. I get a workout. The same principles that I use in yoga and as a yoga instructor are the same principles I use at work. So there's that, right? And so that is a non-negotiable, and my yoga students who come for free, who I've been teaching for 8+ years, they keep showing up. It fills my cup to see them continue to progress every single week, right? It's like, if you show up, you have nothing, there's no option to not get better. And so it's the same principles. At work, you just have to show up. That's the hardest thing to do, is just show up. The other principle that I use is that I'm not the one who's teaching you. You are your own teacher, and I am here but to guide you, right? And especially through a video screen, right? I'm just guiding you and giving you the tools, but you're the ones who are actually doing the work and being present, right? So there's so many parallels between leading a team and how I teach yoga. And so it's instead of thinking everything is separate, right? I have to go work out to be better. I have to go do this. If you intertwine them all, I am one whole person and this is me showing up to life, right? And so this idea of work-life balance and this separation, right? Am I constantly thinking about work? Sure. Absolutely. I'm thinking about and strategizing the things, but I'm also being present with I try to be present with my kids, but your brain isn't compartmentalized okay, I'm going to do work, I'm going to shut it off. And then, I'm going to do kids. And then, right. It's a constant, right. This is a different philosophy, right. And that's how I approach it. And I think this also comes in with a lot of the kind of the parent training classes that I've gone to, right. Which is, all right, we're going to dedicate special playtime, for Kaiden, special playtime for my kids. And it's not quantity. It's not quantity. And this goes back to, I also have a personal, a therapist, right? And they literally teach. It's interesting because the therapist will also talk about things for work. And my executive coach will also talk about things for home because they're really the same thing.
Yeah.
And then it was something that she said that was super profound, which was if your child or if your husband walked by you at home, because we all work from home, and just took 15 seconds to be I think you're really special, or I love you. And then and just walked and went about her day. What's the impact of that? Right? It's huge, right? Yeah. Just that moment, right? Or I'm so appreciative of, blah, 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 right? And it was to highlight that it's not quantity of time. It's the quality and the intention, right? So like my yoga student we had lunch yesterday with all my yoga students and like just taking like the 30 seconds to tell me, hey, I've noticed a real difference in how you're so much calmer and peaceful with your children, right? Like what is the impact of that, right? Yeah. And so I think let's talk about mom guilt.
Yes.
Right? Self-compassion, right? Because we beat ourselves up all the time. I'm like, I forgot, like 2 weeks ago, I forgot that my daughter had a spelling test. I'm like, whoops, that didn't go so well, right? Because I forgot. I'm like, well, how was I supposed to remember to read 15 emails that come through my personal email account, right? And remember when the spelling test was? I'm like, I can't remember when the math test was versus a spelling test. I think math test is this Friday, right? And like, does she have homework or not? I don't understand what's going on, right? And just having self-compassion. And I think, I don't know about you, but do we feel guilty for not spending enough time? And so I think it's like changing the dialogue and changing the language, which is, and this is like, I think from like the PCIT therapy that we've been doing because of my kids. And again, this revelation is, hey, 5 minutes of special playtime. What does that mean? And like PCIT is very specific. It's about it's about like changing your language. And again, I can use this at work, which is instead of saying don't do this and don't do that, it's what to do. And it's interesting because PCIT therapy, it basically it's one-on-one coaching that gets you to basically you don't ask questions during the 5 to 30 minutes of special playtime. You are basically narrating or doing what's called label praise. You can YouTube like what PCIT is for any other parents that are out there. And it was interesting because when we did our reflection this week, like we've done it for like, I don't know, 6 or 8 weeks, I was just like, oh, well, Kaiden hasn't hit me in like a couple months now. Or like his demeanor and behavior is like a lot better. And like, I'm not getting notes from school that he's punching some kid or biting some kid like every week, right? Because like it's that parent. I'm that parent, right? It's like, oh, okay, he punched someone. He has big feelings and he's a sensory seeker. So that's how he communicates. So like, my kids are neurodiverse. Like the society, we can go into another thing like, well, this society makes it challenging for neurodiverse children. Yeah. Well, that's a different thing. But like just those, but think about it. The 5 minutes that we do every day of like, it's basically like we don't ask questions because if you think about you asking a question to your child can seem like you are questioning what they do. So it's like, it's a very specific time where I can use that tool and pull it out and being very specific. I'm so proud of you that you tried and jumped into the pool in swim class and even though you were scared and nervous. So it's like being very specific in your language, but just like doing that, and we don't do it every day, right? But like, so just having done that, in the past 8 weeks, 3 months, and noticing a difference, right? It's a long-winded way of saying it's not about the quantity of time. And I think for me personally, taking that and then being very intentional of the time that I am spending with them, making it very intentional.
Yeah.
Right? Because you have only so many hours in the day. Guess what? This is the same principle that I talked to with my team.
Yeah.
Which is you only have so many hours in the day. Your responsibilities just doubled. How are you going to take the same amount of hours and be and be more productive? It's not working longer hours. It's how can you be very intentional? Like talk about marshmallows, right? Like how am I going to move 20 marshmallows forward an inch every single day instead of trying to move 5 marshmallows a foot? Because you're never going to like get that enough time. But if we have like, and I think I haven't read any of the books, but like the blocks of time or like, I haven't read so much of the productivity books or anything like that, but being very, very intentional of like, what am I going to move today? Like an inch.
Yeah. Well, you even made me think of, there's this like scarcity mindset that I feel like we have in our work life. And especially you always have that mom guilt. I mean, I don't know anybody who can keep up with all the damn emails that come from the school. And then you show up and everyone's dressed in Halloween gear and your kid is like in the hot pink and you're like, shit, I forgot another email. But I think where we should sit is in the abundance mindset of, what are we grateful for? What are the things that we're doing good? Because that negative self-talk track is not good for the self-compassion. And I think also it changes our approach in the way we communicate with not only our team, but with our kids. I mean, Jess, there's so much I feel like we can go into in this conversation, and all of it has been so massively helpful, from understanding how you leverage your village, your community, how you start to have parallels of being highly efficient and not just like kind of segregating work life versus personal life versus fill my cup with doing yoga classes. I think this has been massively helpful. The last question that I will have for you is, in a world full of possibilities, what mark do you dream of leaving as a trailblazer for future generations of empowered women?
What we're doing right here, right? And helping others have like a complete mindset shift. Right. I do that at work with like mentoring marketing operations professionals to try to help them in career. I do them with my yoga students because if I can help them change one person or their mindset, it's really about a mindset shift and guide them, right? I'm not the teacher. You're your own teacher. My yoga students at home, other moms, and inspiring them. Like my ultimate dream would be eventually like, how do I get a TED Talk, right? Like around this topic. I haven't figured that out yet. But it's inspiring others at work, as a mom, in life. That's the mark that I want to leave.
I love that. I love it. And thank you so much, Jess. Like I said, I think this has been massively helpful. I know it's been for me, and I guarantee it's just as helpful for our listeners. So thank you so much for sharing your story with us, for getting vulnerable. And as we wrap up today's episode, let's remember that in supporting one another, we amplify our strengths and we break down barriers. So go out there, champion for your dreams, empower your peers, and continue to shape a future where every woman realizes her true potential. Until next time, see ya.